She's an independent producer, a writer, a mom, practically a superhero, and a role model. I'm talking, of course, about Tiffany FitzHenry. Welcome back to the show, Tiffany. Really great to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be back on your show.
It's been too long, for real.
It really has.
Now, the story that we're going to talk about tonight is something that I really haven't touched on yet, but of course you and I have been in communication talking about this thing. It's got to be one of the craziest stories to come around in a long, long time. I personally never heard of this guy before this whole news came up where he was, beat down by two super yoked Nigerian guys who were supposed to be MAGA hat wearing Trump lovers, but
White guy.
Yeah, right. What's the story here, Tiffany? What's the latest on Mr. Smollett?
Well, Jason, this thing just keeps developing. It's like if you stop paying attention for an hour, there's a new development. And why I find this story so absolutely fascinating is because I think we're getting to see inside the machine that has really been present for a long time that we haven't really necessarily known was there. And it's this machine whereby celebrities are used to perpetrate narratives through our culture and through our society and make us believe things and make us believe the world is a certain way, our country has certain issues. And it's really all an orchestrated hoax, just like this story has now been proven to be.
Is it proven yet, Tiffany, that it's a hoax, or is it suspected of being a hoax at this moment?
What has happened, to sort of fast forward to where we're at right now, is that the two brothers, the two Nigerian brothers, have been let go and
Oh,
have
really?
been let without charges because they presented evidence that this was all staged. So it has been
Wow.
alleged, I guess. Jussie Smollett is now being requested to come speak to the police, but his attorneys are speaking to the police right now, and no formal charges have been filed. But there is talk of a grand jury as soon as. So lot of moving pieces. But what we're seeing is the establishment and the establishment powers, people like Al Sharpton,
Yeah.
just in lockstep, all just sort of pivot at the same time and turn on this guy.
Yeah. I think if Al Sharpton calls you a hoax, it's like, that's not good. He's the
Not,
king of the. Wasn't Al Sharpton's career started with a hoax? Tawana Brawley, I think, was the hoax that he.
yeah, yeah, and I think that maybe that's what they're. Who knows what people used to say things like there is no bad press. Sometimes people will still say things like that. I don't think that that's really true, especially in this case. This is not good.
No. Yeah, I mean, this guy's career is looking like it's over, and considering he's somebody that, I mean, unless you're an Empire fan, I've never seen this guy before. I don't think he's going to be doing too much. The fact that they're already cutting scenes from the show, that's a big deal. When you first came on Crowdsource the Truth, you were talking to us about how the CIA works with Hollywood studios and TV shows to promote certain narratives. And of course, we always see these, dopey actors coming out and, like George Clooney telling us who to vote for and everything like that. But this literally takes the cake. There's never been another story like this that I'm aware of. I think most people are generally spending their time trying to avoid getting beaten up by, these guys look like pretty rough customers. I would not want to punch from one of these guys. Although this particular photo, they kind of remind me of Milli Vanilli. They're just like, girl, it's true. They're just like standing there. But
The similarities are kind of uncanny. It's kind of funny. It's really funny when you really start digging into this story. You start because you're right. Who would stage this, right?
yeah,
Why would you stage this? So you think initially, okay, it's to get your name in the papers because no press is bad press. But if you dig just one shred deeper, the story gets really weird. And it gets really weird and really interesting really fast. It was this lynching type attack, right?
Right.
They had this rope. Well, first of all, just for the people who don't know, I guess, you know, it was supposed to be two white men who at 2 o'clock in the morning, when Jussie Smollett woke up from a dead sleep and was hungry and decided not to order Uber Eats, not to order a pizza, to go to Subway during a literal polar vortex.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, at 2 in the morning, where these guys were supposedly just lying in wait, I guess. I don't know. And they attacked him, hurling racial slurs, homophobic slurs, wearing MAGA hats, two white guys. This is the
Right.
report
Yeah.
from Jussie, and saying, "This is MAGA country," right?
Right. I think the CPD had an amazing quote because they said it's just laughable to presume that any Trump fan would even watch Empire and know who the guy is. I don't know. The Chicago PD, this is the type of thing. You can't just go making false reports. I mean, this is really stupid. But the thing that's most amazing about it are the sort of high-level politicians who are now connected to it. Cory Booker, was using this initially as a talking point for, his assertions that an anti-lynching law must be passed. I mean, lynching's got to be illegal. What is the purpose of this law? Who's
Well,
lynching anybody?
that's a really big question mark right there. This was a legislation that was stalled, and that they were trying stalled for probably pretty good reason, because it's irrelevant. It's not happening.
Right.
Um, so you do wonder, one does wonder, why they would want to make it a felony to lynch someone.
Well, I think it should be. We should say lynching somebody is just murder. How is it not a felony?
Right, right. By any means that you take someone's life,
Yeah.
or hang them, or kill them, or shoot, that is a felony. So strange to begin with. But they
Yeah.
immediately pivoted to citing what had happened to Jussie. It was immediate as the reason why this legislation needed to be passed. And then it was immediately passed
Oh, really?
in the Senate. Yeah.
I think, we need laws about more important things that are. Let me rephrase that. Lynching anyone is terrible, and definitely having a law against it is important. But it just, like you said, it doesn't seem that relevant. It seems to come out of nowhere that they would even have this anti-lynching law. And of course, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker have basically had to really kind of move away from this. I mean, look, this seems like kind of a race baiting tactic to me, right?
Yeah. It seems to me like the insertion of narratives into our society. So the narrative being that we're divided, the narrative being that anybody who supports Make America Great Again, or anyone who supports the agenda of Donald Trump or this current administration, is racist, bigoted, homophobic. Those are the narratives that are being shoved down the throat of this society. And then you go and you walk around in your life and you're like, none of that's true.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not true. People are fine. People very much are loving in society. It's not the way it's being portrayed to us that it is. There's a big disconnect.
Yeah, and the thing is, these incidents are sort of coming fast and furious now, because it was not that long ago that this kid was just this kid from Catholic school was in Washington D.C. on like a field trip, and we had this Native American man sort of walk right up to him. And if you're a 15-year-old kid and this sort of scraggly old dude comes up to you playing the drums or whatever he was doing, that's a weird moment. Like, what do you do? Whoops.
Right.
You got to get 99 cents a week. But of course, these kids have been exonerated. This was another story where they said they were wearing MAGA hats. Is he wearing a MAGA hat?
I think that he was, but
Yeah.
that doesn't give someone license to harass a child, A, and B,
Yeah.
they're since suing. That child's family is suing I believe, the whole of the mainstream media and a lot of celebrities who took to Twitter immediately to slander this child. And so it's a new day, Jason. Things are, things are heating up and they're changing for these hoaxes. And you just kind of wonder how long this has been going on for us, and we didn't really know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking right now about Kathy Griffin, who was like calling for people to name these kids by name and even attack them. Why is Kathy Griffin still on Twitter? Laura Loomer has been kicked off of Twitter for saying that Ilhan Omar is supported by the Muslim Brotherhood or something along those lines. And Kathy Griffin is calling for doxing and injuring of a 15-year-old kid who was just standing on the stairs. And nothing's wrong with that, according to Twitter.
Right. I mean, I think that Twitter's policies are really obviously revealing themselves to be very, very biased.
I should say Tiffany is very big on Twitter, and people who are seeing her for the first time can follow her there. She is at Tiff_FitzHenry, and Tiffany is a writer and producer, as we said. She's an avid tweeter as well. So what do we think is going to happen? How is it that the cops, I mean, this isn't like a civil suit. If the cops want to talk to you, how does your lawyer be like, nah?
Well, I think right now it's a game of cat and mouse amongst the powers that be. So what I see happening is, strangely, this connection to Kamala Harris is deep. There are pictures going back a couple of years of Jussie Smollett with prominent politicians, and there are pictures going back with him and Kamala Harris. And so it's all too convenient that this bill, immediately went through, and that this lynching was a part of his supposed attack. So, but what's happening, Jason, is that you know how the media machine of the Soros media machine works. We saw that for Hillary Clinton. We saw the entirety of the mainstream media being in the bag for Hillary Clinton. It was proven by the WikiLeaks emails that there was collusion between the whole of the mainstream media and the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. This same money is behind Kamala Harris. So what happened in 2016 after the election and then into 2017 was the David Brocks of the world, the George Soroses of the world, the very, very powerful inner circle of super PAC donors that supported Hillary Clinton rallied around Kamala Harris at that time. So I'm not surprised we're seeing what we're seeing in the media. Everybody pivoting so hard against this hoaxer.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if it's between him and Kamala Harris, she ain't going down.
Well, I think she might as a result. She's been having a pretty bad week. Her own father blasted her for a Jamaican pot joke. She doesn't look too happy in this photograph. But I think she was on the same radio show where Hillary Clinton was so condescending to the host, who I believe is black, talking about having hot sauce in her purse.
Yeah.
It's just like, Hillary Clinton is such an idiot. I can barely believe it. But so I guess everybody goes on this show to do their major political gaffes.
Well, you know what I saw was that, so she made that comment, first of all, about smoking pot and listening to Tupac while she was in college, which was in the 80s, which was before Tupac was even around, first of all. Second of all, those are really sort of big media headline grabbing things to say, and she's she's a very smart person. She made those marijuana comments right in the height of all of this Jussie Smollett stuff.
Oh,
so
really?
To me, it was a manufactured distraction.
Right. Yeah, I'm not so sure that I agree with the statement that she's a smart person. I can't seem to get to this article here. It wants me to enter something for an ad. But yeah, It's really funny because I remember not long ago where the concept of smoking pot and not even inhaling was a potential deal breaker for Bill Clinton. He didn't even get into all the cocaine that he snorted and the rapes he was doing. So now we see candidates getting out in front trying to insist that they smoked pot when they didn't. Or perhaps she smoked so much pot she couldn't remember what was on the CD player at the time.
Or the fact that Tupac was 5 years old at the time.
Oh my
You know,
God, that's so funny. That's a big deal.
I think she referenced Tupac and someone else, both of whom were, we were a decade from having
Tribe
their
Called Quest
Yeah.
and Too Short, Tupac and Snoop in college. Simplest explanation is that she just misremembered what music came out. I mean,
Right,
that's not that big a deal, but if she's trying to show that she's like cool and in touch with regular people, that's a little bit sort of like, oh, I can't tell one rapper for another. It's sort of like something that Hillary Clinton would say, some,
Right.
borderline racist, like she can't tell one rapper for another.
Oh, it's definitely a gaffe.
Yeah,
It definitely did not land.
yeah. So now, Tiffany, you've done a lot of exploration and explanation to our audience with regard to this CIA liaison office in Hollywood. Is there any connection here? Like, how does Jussie Smollett even know all these politicians? We saw a photograph here where he's hanging out with Obama. How long has Empire been on TV, and is it even that popular of a show? I don't watch anything on TV, really. I'm just watching YouTube and mostly making shows on YouTube. Is it that popular that he gets to meet the president?
Well, we're all in the same boat as you in that, no, you're right. We're not watching this show. I don't know who is watching this show. He's been on it since 2015. And before that, he's had quite a long career. If you look into him, he started as a child actor, which is a whole rabbit hole.
Oh,
You go
yes.
down. Yeah, he started in as early as I think 1995 or something with maybe Mighty Ducks or something. He must have been very young.
He looks like he's 20 now.
Right. So I looked at his IMDb, and he looks like he was in some movies in the 90s. He has 5 siblings, all of whom are actors, all of whose name begin with a J. In 2015, Jussie also came out as gay, openly gay. He did that on Ellen. So when you talk about the CIA, and you talk about the CIA's involvement in Hollywood and the Entertainment Liaison Office, I want people to understand that these things are actually all connected. There is a narrative that is thread through, and I know of people who have told me that there's a system in place of, I guess, rewards for being on message. And I mean, I have nothing against, how anyone wants to live their life or what 2 adults want to do. But being gay is definitely very on message in terms of the narrative. Trans, I mean, we can all see, look at Kate Hudson just this week coming out saying she doesn't know what her baby's going to identify as.
Oh.
I mean, this is the messaging. I think we're all pretty aware of it. It's pretty obvious. So he does that. He comes out as gay. His father passed away the same year, and Jason, there's a funny, strange coincidence of celebrities getting their big break when someone around them dies. Someone around them dies, and they get their big break. This is a rabbit hole that your audience can go down and start to look at it. You look at Charlize Theron. You look at all these people who we continually see put out these narratives very actively. And more often than not, there's a major death in their family just as they're making it. Take that for what it's worth, but this kid is the same.
Now,
His
Tiffany,
dad was
Sorry to interrupt you there, but we've got Jennifer in the comments on Periscope who's saying maybe Ellen is CIA. I like that comment because you remember Ellen was the only person to interview, what was that guy's name? Jesus Campos? Why did they have Ellen interview
Why does Ellen? Yeah, and listen, that is the exact right thinking right there. That comment from that viewer, that is the exact, that is what's happening here. These people are agents, really, if that's, you can think of them in that way. And listen, Ellen has slots, right, at the Mandalay Bay.
Right.
Ellen makes a lot, in the Mandalay Bay, if you look into the ownership of that resort or that property, it's interesting. It's MGM. Saudi. Yeah, and you go, these things are definitely all connected in a way. And one of the common threads is always the CIA. And it's so much more infiltrated in Hollywood than people would ever want to believe, which is why I work to decentralize the power of Hollywood.
Right. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I think at this point, people almost associate MGM more with Vegas than Hollywood. But of course, MGM stands for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And Sam Goldwyn was one of the founders of Hollywood, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. I'm forgetting my history a little bit, but MGM was a studio before it owned all these resorts all around the world and all this gambling stuff. And they got the Lions there at the MGM Grand. It was founded in 1924 when the entertainment entrepreneur Marcus Lowe gained control of Metro Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures, and Louis B. Mayer Pictures. Mayer, who is Louis Mayer?
These figures of early Hollywood were all very high-ranking Masons, and the Freemasonry is very connected to the CIA, and all of these sort of occult secret societies are often very connected with what was once the OSS, right? Then became the CIA. This is what I think they would like us to believe is not all connected and is not going on, and they go, okay, this is some conspiracy theory. It's not. You can look all of this up. These are all verifiable facts.
Yeah.
So Louis B. Mayer, I believe, was one of these very high-ranking Masons, along with pretty much all of these early studio founders.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I apologize to Jennifer Madison if I haven't noticed her in the comments before, but she's on fire tonight. She's reminding us that the Smith Modernization Act allows for state propaganda, and I mean, who else is going to make up a story to tell people other than people in Hollywood? And so people are going to, in the CIA, people are going to watch this show and say, oh, Jason and Tiffany were both in Hollywood, but it's important to point out that you're not in Hollywood now, you're in Atlanta. On the earlier shows, you told us about how very early in your career, you won all kinds of accolades, writing awards. Steven Spielberg was interested in a script that you had written and personally was coming to meet you. That is so unusual. People really need to understand what that's all about. But you and I, sorry, I forgot the most important part of your story, which is that you were blatantly sexually harassed by a producer to whom you refused to concede, and you basically left Hollywood over that. And you and I are sort of Hollywood outsiders. I'm not even in the business anymore. The only motion pictures that I make is stuff that people can watch here on YouTube. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, but what's really great is it's a good time to be an outsider as Hollywood is swiftly becoming irrelevant. And I think what we want to be is on the outside. I don't want to be on the inside of something that's falling.
Yeah, and I was looking at this movie the other day. I was talking with Fireman John, who's been on the show a bunch of times. He's friends with the producers, and I think what happened was, I forget, one of the producers I think was on Alex Jones talking about, I'm forgetting the details of why I was looking at this, but I watched this film, An Open Secret, which is a really great film that people should watch if they haven't seen it. And this talk, because it was Bryan Singer was in that Atlantic article where some journalists for the Atlantic Monthly went and researched a lot of the allegations that were made in this film, which are all basically proven to be true. Now, the bizarre thing is, a lot of people have tried to link me to Bryan Singer because I worked on the visual effects unit of X-Men. But you know, Tiffany, in Hollywood, when you have a big movie like X-Men, you know, being on a special unit for 2 days, or even being on the main unit of the whole film, you don't meet and hang out with a director unless you're like one of the stars of the movie or the cinematographer, or really in the top, and usually just above the line people are dealing with the director, and you're certainly not going to the director's house. This is like saying you work for IBM and you're having beers with the CEO or something like that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important for your audience to understand is that there is a big delineation between above the line and below the line. And your Jennifer brought up CIA. These CIA tactics are what we're seeing in the Mockingbird media right now. It's ubiquitous across the media and Hollywood. So you have people like Bryan Singer, who isn't just a derelict by chance. He's a derelict by design. It's much easier to control people. You know, if people have influence, if you're going to be a $10 million director, you're going to have influence. Well, they don't want to just bestow influence upon somebody who can just do and say whatever they want. They want to manage who gets that influence, and they want to control those people. Well, it's really easy to control people who diddle little kids because you could destroy them at any second, you know? It all works together. These are CIA tactics. This is compromise and control. So we should really start to be able to see pretty clearly what we're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, even though he's been disgraced, his last film, Bohemian Rhapsody, is winning all kinds of awards and accolades. It does seem like Bryan Singer's career is not really going to last very much longer. Here's the article from The Atlantic. The thing that is happening now that is a good thing is that I think some of these victims are being empowered. Yeah, this is the quote, "Nobody is going to believe you." I think this is something that Bryan Singer said to the victims, and it's when you're a kid and somebody tells you that, I think intimidation is probably a big part of this process, and the fact that these stories are coming out are going to empower more people to come forward with stuff. You know, maybe I shouldn't go here, but what happened with that guy Isaac Cappy who was hurling accusations at everybody, including me, by the way?
I think that Isaac has, you know, really he went really hard down the pedophilia and child trafficking sort of rabbit hole, and I think it really will just, it's so dark and it really will just mess with you. And I appreciate the people who dig into those things on such a level, but I don't envy them because it's so dark, you can't stay down there. And I think that through a combination of things, we're also getting completely deplatformed. So
did he get deplatformed? I mean, he was just making a lot of accusations without presenting evidence. He didn't say that he was a victim. He used like, I heard this, I heard that. Pretty irresponsible.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you're not going to see me doing those things. I think that there is a responsibility because you know, I didn't experience the things that he experienced, although, and I didn't witness and see the things that he witnessed and saw. But again, you know, I don't know. I think that you also can't be hurling accusations that are that big, especially at a time like this when we're finding out all these things are true. Right. So then everybody's going to develop that mob mentality.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see how this whole Jussie Smollett thing definitely seems to be backfiring on him. Full timeline here, CBS News. You know, it's also another good example of the fake news phenomenon, because I remember there was a lot of reporting that came out as if this were fact when the guy made the allegation, and it's definitely exploding in their faces now. I wonder how many of these... Sorry?
It was immediately accepted as absolute fact, to the point where, you know, Ellen Page goes on Colbert and has this 5-minute rant that now sounds positively ridiculous. She's, having an emotional come apart about what happened to Jussie Smollett. Meanwhile, never actually happened. We have to start to understand that our celebrities, just like our news people, they're really just these creations, and they get talking points too, just like the media is getting talking points. So it's like, okay, this happened. Okay, let's put Ellen Page out front and talking about, these subjects. And it's all this huge mind control cycle. And it really hand in hand. And these are CIA tactics, and these are narratives, and these are talking points.
So here's something interesting along the lines of what you're talking about. So this is, I haven't seen this, but it says this, it's not playing for some reason, but it says there's a video of Ellen Page blaming Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence for the alleged attack. Now, obviously that's the purpose of it, but see, we are seeing the naked face of these lame tactics where Ellen comes out and says this stuff loud and all over TV. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. I wonder how many people see this but then don't see the part of the story where we find out that it's false. So they spend all this energy putting out this narrative that people think, oh, Trump is racist and anti-gay and all this kind of stuff. And then when it comes time to vote in 2020, doesn't matter what the facts are. This is what's been driven into everybody's head. I saw something earlier that Trump is behind some international move to abolish the illegality of homosexuality in foreign countries.
It does not go with the narrative, right? I mean, so if you see the Trump administration, which includes Mike Pence, by the way, who Ellen Page ends up blaming the whole Jussie Smollett attack on in a bizarre roundabout. They basically are internationally, moving to internationally decriminalize homosexuality, and it's a move against Iran. It's a move against these countries that still, put people to death for these things. There's human rights, and then, there's narratives that are being spun by the CIA. And I think that there's a fine line between, well, there's probably a big line between, mind control, propagating these ideas and seeding them into the consciousness of our society and our culture, and just not wanting to throw gay people off of buildings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be doing that. But we also don't necessarily need to be telling 5-year-old boys that they're going to get their period.
Who's telling them that?
Oh, Google it. It's now being taught in UK schools. They're teaching that gender is, if you're a boy and, maybe you'll be getting your period too. It's this whole transgender agenda, which is real.
I was having a conversation with G. Edward Griffin, the guy who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, and he has the Red Pill Expo, and he got that from The Matrix. And I spoke to him about the irony that the Wachowski brothers, who are, I've been since informed that they didn't actually create The Matrix or whatever, but they're the credited directors of the film. They're now the Wachowski sisters, both of them being transgendered. It's really amazing. I wonder what percentage of the overall population is transgender versus the number of transgender people that are depicted in media. And I mean, there's so much energy behind that.
And there are a lot of actual very important reasons to dig into of why there is so much energy behind that. And it actually, it does go back to a lot of these same things about the CIA. And if you want to subvert a culture, and also a lot of people do believe that there is a big push to make pedophilia accepted. I don't know if you've kind of heard about this. And this is all part of that as well, I think.
Are they going to make murder acceptable as well?
Right. I mean, yeah, where does it even end?
This number seems high to me.
Fine with that. If we're just making the murder of pedophiles legal, I'm good with that.
Right, but we're seeing here Wikipedia is telling us that 0.5% of America is transgendered. That seems like a huge number to me. I wonder if that's accurate.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and there was a really important study that came out, I think within the last 6 months, about the suicide rate amongst
Right.
transgender teenagers. And it really pointed to that, this is not really about sexuality so much as it is mental dysmorphia. And the way our society is treating it is actually exacerbating the symptoms and the depression and a lot of times eventually the suicide. So yeah, I don't even know where to go with that one.
Well, see, the interesting thing, someone raised a point that I hadn't thought of previously. I was just having a conversation with somebody at Anarchapulco, and they were talking about how so many of the chemicals in food and pesticides and plastics in water bottles and stuff like that mimic estrogen in the body and disrupt normal hormonal function. So I wonder if this increase in transgender or gender dysmorphia or whatever we want to call it is due to the chemical misalignment of our environment. And then, we've got other mentally ill individuals like Ocasio-Cortez, who's trying to, sorry, let me take that back. We have no evidence that she's mentally ill. She just acts like she is. She's
Right.
trying to convince us that carbon dioxide is a problem. And I've got an issue with this because, you see, to me, pretty clearly,
Now,
industrialization on a large scale and chemical production and pollution of the planet is a huge problem. But carbon dioxide is not it. Sulfur monoxide, mercury, chlorine, fluoride, other chemicals in our environment are really bad for us, and they're so focused on carbon dioxide, which is just idiotic. And I think a lot of people don't realize that Al Gore was one of the two founders of the Chicago the Carbon Credit Exchange, Chicago, Climate Exchange or something like that. So this was a big push to make money, and Al Gore, of course, was behind the movie The Inconvenient Truth. I mean, this is another place where we see this nexus of Hollywood and politics and utilizing motion pictures to convince people of things. Here's this Chicago Climate Exchange, which is essentially a commodities exchange where carbon credits, oh, wait a minute now. Why is Al Gore missing from here? I was looking at this the other day, and it said Al Gore and Richard Sandor, and that's gone now. Interesting to note that the niece of Richard Sandor has been trolling me in comments on my videos and doesn't like it that I'm talking about the fact that her uncle is the founder of a scam to charge people for producing carbon dioxide, something that we exhale. So they've figured you can't charge people to breathe, that's too egregious, but we're going to charge people to exhale.
I mean, I think that they want us afraid of our own breath. They certainly want us afraid of our own footprint. You know, I don't know how you live in a world like that. I don't know what the point of us even being here is then. So I think these are really fundamental, insane things. And you mentioned how Hollywood is used to propagate these narratives. You mentioned his documentary, which he's made a lot of money off of the climate situation, right?
Well, the profits from the film are nothing. I mean, this is an article about it here that's talking about surprise, Al Gore and his carbon credit huckster partner, David Blood. I don't think I knew about that guy. Both principals at the Generation Invest in Management. See, that's interesting that they took his name off of the carbon climate exchange thing there in Wikipedia, because if people go back and look at the videos that I've done with David Hawkins, he was right in there. It's amazing, Tiffany, how fluid the internet is. It's almost like gender these days. It can be whatever it wants.
we don't know how it's going to identify today or tomorrow.
Yeah. So if you even question this narrative that carbon dioxide is not destroying the environment, it's helping trees and plants grow, suddenly you're a climate denier, you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to have a venue. And also the other thing is they talk about this notion of settled science, which, guess what? There's no such thing as settled science. That's a
Not how
term
science
from
works.
lawyers. What's that?
That's not how science works.
Right. You
Like,
discover new things that sometimes overturn theories. You know, when they came out with quantum mechanics, the guy who proposed it was laughed at, and now they've got computers and things that are based on quantum physics. And so settled science is a term that is bastardized by lawyers. It comes from settled law, where you don't have to look at it anymore. So it's really important. I've been talking about this a lot because I really want people to be aware. We're trying to counter a narrative that's being, shouted from the rooftops by the most powerful people in Hollywood and in government.
well, and AOC, you bring her up, she has just taken Sundance by storm. This is how storytelling is used to validate people. You know, um, there was just a documentary about her that just, I don't know where this girl came from. I don't know who's really propping her up or manufacturing her, but it's super convenient that this documentary about her has just exploded into, she's just made a bunch of money off on, the documentary now has been sold to Netflix, obviously. This is my problem as a storyteller is I know the power of stories and I know what happens to our brains when we're observing what we believe is storytelling. We go into a very suggestible state. We can't help it. This is by design. This is a good thing because storytellers like myself are getting downloads of what we're supposed to write. We're not getting talking points of what we're supposed to write. This is why I didn't want to write for Hollywood, because I don't want to mind control people. I want them to get what is moving through me. I think that what moves through artists and what we're compelled to create is sort of humanity's birthright. We need that information. That information tells us who we are, where we're going, what to build. It comes from the imagination, which is connected to the divine, unless it's connected to the CIA. You know what I mean? So, you take a look at the world that we have, and you can kind of see why when you look at our storytelling. And AOC is a perfect example. She's been completely propped up by storytelling, and
Yeah.
it's egregious.
Yeah. Now, so you've had really an exceptional career. I mean, you and I have spoken about it in the past, and you got a lot of attention very early on. I don't know how much time you spent in really the independent cinema world, but putting something, even getting it into Sundance, is really difficult to do. And I've been to DC quite a lot in the past 2 years. I've met a bunch of different people that have been running for Congress, military veterans, etc. And the notion of an independent person, forget about man, woman, veteran, coffee waitress, whatever AOC was, it is super difficult. I would say it's as difficult or more difficult to have a successful congressional campaign as it is for someone who's never made a film before to write and produce their own film and get it into Sundance, let alone to sell it for $10 million. That is a huge sum for an independent film. And also, how would a documentary filmmaker even know to find this coffee shop waitress who's running for Congress and choose to make a movie about her? It's pretty implausible. I think it would be a better bet to make a movie about one of these veterans who are running for Congress, who have experience in the military and are closer to the government in that regard. The whole thing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just it smells rotten to me. It smells like it's set up by George Soros or one of these big money guys. They select her because she's got the right look, she's the right age, she's the right demographic. It's almost like they went to a focus group and said, this is the candidate, right?
Well, and I think she'll say the right things. It was told to me in Hollywood that I needed to be willing to do anything. And not only that, I needed to actually say in meetings at networks with executives who wanted my TV shows those very words. I needed to say specifically, I'm willing to do anything.
Who told you to say that? Your agent?
Yeah. And you need to say you're willing to do anything. I'm like, I wouldn't say those words ever to anyone
Right.
under any circumstances. So you understand, I am not willing to do anything. And it was, I think, at that moment when I realized this is a lot of how the world works. So you have somebody like AOC, and everybody's got a currency. And this is something that Kevin Shipp and I have talked a lot about. When you talk about the deep state and you talk about the shadow government, because a lot of that's a little bit, kind of what we're talking about in a way. Um, Everybody has their currency. And when you're talking about the deep state and the way that they control people, it's through greed. So it just depends on what your currency is, right? So it's blackmail, greed. Some people, have, certain sexual appetites. However and whichever way you can own somebody, then they can start to get influence. So AOC has a tremendous amount of influence now.
Yeah.
I don't believe for one second she's not owned.
Yeah.
And it's people like me who are garnering influence and nobody owns us, right? And it's like you start to understand the difference of having a voice and being able to say whatever you want. And that's what the people are craving now.
Yeah.
The people wanted Roseanne, but they got the Connors. They don't want that anymore. Do you
Is
know
that
what I mean?
show still on?
No, I mean it's miserable. It failed miserably because the people wanted Roseanne, but ABC was like, "No, you'll have the Connors. And they were like, "Of yours," you know.
That's sad what happened to Roseanne. I mean, it was unfortunate what she said on Twitter, but I guess that's the way it goes. The other thing that's really interesting for me, Tiffany, because a lot of people watch YouTube and they say, oh, you worked in Hollywood, and they don't have a very clear picture of what that is. You're a writer, and I was a technical guy. I was in the camera department dealing with 3D cameras, which was a vastly different thing. I don't have nearly as much control over what the outcome of a movie will be as the writer would. So for them to control you it's interesting to notice this subtlety.
No, I've come out and said this, and since I've come out and said what I've said, I've been contacted by, I can't even begin to tell you how many people within Hollywood, by the way, who thank me for delineating between the people who are asked to join the club are above the line. Writers, directors, actors, producers.
Right.
If you see a writer, director, actor, or producer who's super mega powerful, they're in the club. Like, sorry, you don't get to have influence and not be.
Yeah.
And
And
they're
also,
all kind
we're
and then
throwing
people
around this term. Sorry to interrupt, Tiffany, but I think a lot of people don't know the difference between above the line and below the line. Above the line is your directors, the high-level people in the production. Below the line is me and all the guys having lunch at the taco truck, just working on the movie.
right. And this is really an important distinction for people to make because people say, is everybody in Hollywood, they think of LA and they just want it to just, I'm like, there are so many good people. And they are the sort of working class people of Hollywood. They're the people who make the movies technically, right? The sound people, the electrical people, the effects, the stunts. Movies could not be made without these people, but these people can't effectively tell you who to vote for. So nobody cares what they do with their influence. They're not going to have influence over large amounts of people because people don't, someone could be the most, important, sound designer in the last 20 years. They could have made every important movie.
Don't know who they are. Yeah.
Right.
So you're trying to tell me that the second unit stereographer doesn't have influence over the entire country? That's really hard to believe. He doesn't get invited to the director's house for parties?
Well, and I've even heard that. It's like people who are below the line, they're all really kind of coming together and they're all kind of going, Jason, I feel like there's a mutiny. And a lot of them have rallied behind me and have rallied behind me speaking out because they're tired of using their talents and their energy and their collective, talent, like I said, to create things that are really just forsaking storytelling, forsaking audience, as has been happening. So there's definitely a mutiny afoot, I would say, amongst the below the line people, which just imagine Hollywood trying to function without these people. It's impossible.
Hollywood was a bit of a disappointment for me, not only because of the things I've spoken about on the show before, but because, you know, when I was hired for Amazing Spider-Man as the second unit stereographer, I remember thinking to myself, you know, if 9-year-old Jason could see 39-year-old Jason here on the set of Spider-Man. I was driving one time in my car to the back lot at Universal Studios, and I thought about when I was a little kid and my parents took me on vacation there on that, you know, that tram ride with the Jaws thing that bites at the car. That was a really early inspiration for me to want to be in movies. And while I was driving to work, that tram drove by and there were people taking pictures of my car. And I was like, wow, I am the tour now.
Yeah,
it was so disappointing because the movie was crap.
You know what's funny though is it's intoxicating for a reason, because it's a closed power system, and you have to get, you know, in by some means. So for someone like yourself, it's this talent of being able to, you know, and do these cameras and have all this, you know, so they can use you, right? Yeah. And then so for someone like me, if I'm not willing to do whatever it is I need to do to be owned, they're going to go to the person who's standing right behind me who maybe is perfectly willing to do it. And that's what you have with a closed power system. It's like Washington.
Yeah.
And so you can compromise and control people because there are so many people willing to get in, because there is only one centralized power structure.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, people really need to keep this in mind. It's like, you know, TV shows, movies, people see that stuff, and, you know, JFK is an example of how they kind of flipped it on everybody, because that's so powerful to give you an alternative impression from the mainstream narrative. And I recall H.W. Bush did a lot of radio interviews saying that Oliver Stone movie was un-American, left-wing propaganda, blah, blah, blah. He was freaking out because it was an example of someone who had become powerful enough in Hollywood that he could sort of turn this against them.
Yeah, the last thing they want is people like Oliver Stone using their talent to tell the stories they want to tell.
Right.
I mean, that is like the nightmare scenario.
Yeah, and you think about
it. Is our closest account. If you've read the declassified JFK documents, Oliver Stone's JFK is our absolutely our closest account to what the truth might be.
Right. And then you think about something like American Made, this film about Barry Seal and Iran-Contra.
So the CIA was involved in that movie.
Of course, and Tom Cruise is way more fit than Barry Seal ever was. He's inherently appealing because everybody knows who Tom Cruise is. Well, I mean, some people hate him or think he's crazy from Scientology or whatever, but the fact is he's one of the most popular actors around, so obviously most people like Tom Cruise, and so you go into that movie with a preconceived notion about the character. If they hired somebody who actually looked like Barry Seal, he might not be as appealing to the audience, and it might not give such a subliminal positive impression of the overall story. And they left out a lot of key parts of what was going on here.
Well, you know, this is one of the things I speak publicly about. I go and do a speaking tour about the CIA and the Pentagon's involvement in Hollywood. And this movie is an exact perfect example of this is a CIA script. So for you know, what happened in Mena, Arkansas is really, really important. And so they want to make sure that they control your perception of what happened in Mena, Arkansas. And so they make this movie, and it becomes the official, you know, events that occurred. Take out whatever they want to take out. So for the CIA to support a film, they get complete line-by-line control over the script. There is not a word in that movie or any movie that the CIA supported, like Salt, like Zero Dark 30, I could go on and on and on, Race to Witch Mountain. There is not a word in any of these movies that the CIA has not signed off on, and they get full edit, and that's through the final cut. So you are watching CIA propaganda.
And you got to be a very famous, influential director to have that final cut, which is you get to decide how the movie is cut. Most of the time, the studio will say, no, Stanley Kubrick, we don't want this scene in Eyes Wide Shut. Cut it out. So having final cut is a lot of power. We're almost out of time here, Tiffany, so I just want to share your website with everyone. It's theoldestsoul.com, and you've written a series of books. What do you want to tell people about The Oldest Soul?
One of the most important things I want to tell people is my books are about symbology. My books are about decoding the occult. They're about this great awakening. So that's why there is an eye on the cover. People are like, there's an eye on the cover of your book. I'm like, this planet's getting so woke that, you know, even people like me who are decoding the occult, you know, people will be like, wait, why is there an eye? I'm like, I'm clearly not in the Illuminati. I'm trying to take the whole thing down. So my books are called The Oldest Soul, and it's Oldest Soul Trilogy. And it's a young adult trilogy about, it's strangely, you'll read it and you'll be like, this is crazy. This is about what's happening right now in so many ways. It's like Da Vinci Code meets, you know, Divergent or something like that. So check those out for sure. I am also on, I'm on Patreon now.
Oh, great.
So you can find me on Patreon. And, you know, what I'm doing with my Patreon is you know, if people want to get behind what I'm doing, which is, you know, independently writing and producing outside of this mind control machine that we've just talked about for the last hour, they can come support me there. And I am making independent films. All the TV shows that Hollywood wanted to make with me, I'm just making on my own. And I'm doing it outside Hollywood. I'm doing it all here in Atlanta. Because my vision is that people shouldn't have to go to Hollywood to be storytellers. And with technology now, they really don't. It's all just a big illusion that we still do. But it's going to take people like me who have the chops to be in Hollywood to not go to Hollywood and to just build right where we are and then help grow this whole new thing. So if people want to support me on Patreon, that's what that goes towards. And that's...
Well, they can do that by going to patreon.com/Tiffany FitzHenry. People can also follow you, Tiffany, on Twitter. You're there at Tiff_FitzHenry. People can follow you there. And you're talking about the changing technology of Hollywood. It's something that I've always been very interested in. It's had a major impact on my Hollywood career. Changing camera technologies allowed me to build 3D cameras that were vastly more capable than the technology that existed in the 1950s in the first commercialization of 3D, and then the 1980s in the second commercialization of 3D. But really, the technology of your core capability of writing, sure, now you can do it on a word processor, but you're still creating words. The technology hasn't fundamentally changed what you do. It has fundamentally changed the process in that you no longer need a massive studio to tell a story, make a motion picture. You can edit it on your laptop, literally, and that's really changing the way Hollywood works. And as a matter of fact, you know, if people think about films that came out in the 80s and things like stories like Kramer versus Kramer, you could make a movie like that literally with an iPhone and a set of lenses, and if you knew how to work the lights and get some filtration on there and direct the actors, I think most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference very much between that and something shot for $20 million. And this is why we see so many Hollywood movies moving towards these gigantic visual effects productions that cost $200 million and license properties that are worth billions and advertise them for hundreds of millions. It's really changed the nature of the types of movies that people are seeing. And my feeling is, not for the better. We've got teams of accountants and actuaries making movies, and we've moved further and further away from artists making movies. And that was one of the main reasons why I got fed up with and ultimately left Hollywood.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, it's funny because people are becoming really, really hip to it. People are just, they're not signing up for another superhero movie the way that, you know, the studios are pushing it on them. So interesting times.
Absolutely. And people can support independent cinema and Tiffany by going to patreon.com/Tiff Tiffany FitzHenry. People can support Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And you know, Tiffany, you might want to look into Subscribestar. A lot of people were getting annoyed with Patreon, so I've started a Subscribestar page at subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. I do have an exclusive episode coming up later tonight on Subscribestar and Patreon at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, just 1 hour from now. I'm going to be joined by Larry Klayman and Mike Moore of True Pundit for another episode of More Pain. I want to thank Tiffany FitzHenry for joining me tonight. It's always so great talking to you, Tiffany. This is a weird story about Jussie Smollett. We'll see what happens. I think he's going to get in a lot of trouble.
I agree. I don't think things are looking good for him. Thanks for having me on, and I'll come back anytime to talk to your awesome.
Thank you, Tiffany. Have a great night and say hello to everybody over there. I'll see you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for watching, everybody.